Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Cramey. Welcome to our session today. We're in session 2 of this week's agenda, and we're going to talk about finished goods and finished goods inventory. From a terminology standpoint, the finished goods, think of it as putting items into finished goods, and then the finished goods inventory piece of the discussion, think of it as pulling items out of finished goods inventory. So we'll quickly touch on who can use features. We'll talk a little bit about putting items into finished goods, and we have to do that based on the database version. So I'll walk through that process for what we refer to as the V2 database, and then repeat that for the V3. I want to stress that independent of what version of the database you have, the process produces exactly the same results. It's a process difference within the data set to accomplish the same functional endpoint. And the same thing's true in item D, where we're going to be talking about pulling items out of finished goods. Essentially, V2 and V3 are identical. I will show some very subtle differences between the two. And then there's a really good report that will show you what has gone into finished goods for a particular purchase order and what the current levels are for that purchase order. There's a handout for this to your go-to meeting section, and under the handouts, there's a PDF document that you might want to download if you haven't already done so. That might be helpful to you if you go back and view this webinar video again, and that might make more sense as you go with the handout. I'm going to pause several times during our discussion today, so that we have ample time for questions. I'm going to switch now to a different view, and then we'll begin our discussion. I'm looking now at what we call the version 2 database, but before we get in talking about how you know which one you have or don't have, there's just some general things that I want to talk about that are more from a conceptual standpoint. First, who can use the finished goods and the finished goods inventory features? The answer is everybody. It's available for anyone to use, to activate or enable anything. The mechanisms and the means of using these features are available to everybody. Might be interesting to what might make the use of this feature attractive. Basically, it boils down to you probably have all been faced with the situation where you have a customer that has a particularly important or pricing scenario. Maybe they are going to repeat a particular item purchase of certain things over and over and over again throughout the year. So they're interested in a pricing setup that's going to be based on perhaps a large volume of items, but be able to take advantage of that and have that pricing be the price that would work as they begin to over the course of the year to pull stuff out of finished goods. So it's creating the pricing mechanism up front, establishing the price of those items, the cost of those per piece and the price per piece, but not invoice the customer. And this is the key point: not invoice the customer until they actually begin the process of incrementally pulling those items out of finished goods. Now, what factors in addition may be an indication that the finished goods feature would be of help? As I've worked with 50, 75 customers over the recent months looking at pricing and pricing strategies, I frequently, in almost every case, I will frequently see customers that have a gross margin for certain orders that are negative. And that when I look at those with the client, it's a common denominator to see that it was fairly obvious that they did an initial estimate or initial order for the larger quantity, but then when it comes time to invoicing that customer, they clone the order, override the price to give the unit price that they want. So the cost basis is based on the entire volume of what they're purchasing in many cases, but the unit price and the total price is based on what they're actually purchasing that time. That may not be the only factor that's involved in the negative gross margin, but I found that it's a fairly common one. The concept of finished goods and finished goods inventory, it's really a two-step process. The first step is I use the term putting goods into finished goods. And when you do that, you're going to associate a purchase order number with that order. And that will be a number that's going to be independent of the invoice number or independent of the estimate number. It's going to be a unique purchase order number that you're going to assign to that order, where you're creating the pricing components, the unit price and the unit cost, where you're establishing that and signing the purchase order to it. But the key to remember is that process, that first step, establishes the unit cost basis and the unit price basis, but there is nothing that is invoiced to the customer at that point. And in fact, we'll see when we're walking through the process, we'll see that the price for that invoice is actually zero. It has all the components there for what's being priced, but there's offsetting the entry that's going to set the price at zero. So the second piece of that then is the flip side. Maybe on a weekly or a monthly or a quarterly basis, a customer will say, hey, I notify you that they want to pull a certain number of items out of finished goods for that particular purchase order. That's when the customer gets invoiced. So they get invoiced on a case-by-case basis as they're pulling items out of finished goods. And they do that by referencing the same purchase order number that resulted in putting the items into finished goods. Now, just a quick comment, the whole concept of finished goods and finished goods inventory there's no direct connection with the use of purchase orders for the purpose of purchasing inventory, raw materials, and putting that into inventory. And the same thing is true. It's not directly related with to the use of the inventory module itself. Similar terminology between purchase orders and inventory, but they're different context altogether. Okay, how do you tell which version you have of control? I happen to be in version 2, and that's where I'm going to start. But we'll talk about how you determine what version of the database that you have. And the reason, again, is because the process is slightly different, producing essentially the same ultimate goal. So the way you can tell is to go up to setup and come down to pricing setup, and then all pricing. And on the on the left-hand side, you're going to look for this entry called user constants. And depending on what version of the database, you're going to have one thing in here that's that's going to be different. You're either going to look for an entry in this second column called product info. And if you don't see that, then you're going to look for an entry called universal product options. So that's what I'm seeing here. So if I select that, that now is leading me to say that you have what we refer to as the version 2 or the V2 database. Then if you come over to the third column and come down to data set version right here, it's got the 290 over here. And then you can see from the text that's down here at the bottom, if I select that one, that you have version, this particular data set is version 2.90. So this is the only part that's important is the 2. Now, when I flip over to the other data set, this universal product option will not be there, but the other entry will be there that says product info. And if you were to select it, it's good. You're going to see an entry in this third column that says data set version, and it will have something like 3.03 or and then some other numbers. So the key number is the 3. That's the data set version. So again, you know which one you have by going to setup, pricing setup, all pricing, looking at user constants, and looking in the second and third column. And that's going to help you determine which of the 2 data sets that you have. As I said, at the beginning, I want to repeat because it's important that the end result from what you're doing is going to essentially the same result in either version. It's just the process that's slightly different in order to get there. I'm going to close this down. Now let's begin the process, and I'm going to start this process by staying in this particular V2 database. So the steps, there's 3 steps that are involved. We're going to create an order that's going to, for purchasing or producing items that you want to put into inventory. Then using the PO map, actually going to put that into inventory. And recall again that the invoice, the customer will not be invoiced for this particular step, okay? So to begin, you're going to go up here to new and new order, just like anything else, okay? You're going to complete the company that you're doing it for and the description that you're going to add. So let's just do one here. I don't know that I'm going to actually say this, but I still want to go through the process. Putting something in the inventory. I want to do this by pointing out a couple of things. There are 2 products in the system in this V2 data set that already have the mechanism of adding to finished goods inventory. The others don't have that automatically associated with the product, but that's not important because we can add it to. So if I come down and look at screen print in screen print signs and open up that pricing form, notice over here on the far right, I'm going to go clear out to the side, and you're going to see this thing that says add to finished inventory. This product, the screen print product, and one other one up in the composition area. Likewise has that, I call it embedded into the product. So it's nice and easy to use that for those two particular products. But the embedding is not associated with the other parts or products that you're going to see in the system. So I'm just going to, for our purposes of discussion, I'm going to focus on the digital prints and specifically the wide format for our illustration today. So this should be the data form, the pricing form that you're going to see. So let's just put in here that we're going to do 7,200 9-inch by 6-inch stickers. We're going to use in the latex printer. We're going to print to vinyl, and we're going to print to just a house grade vinyl. We're going to laminate that with that particular laminate, and we're going to cut it with a plotter. And it's a simple, whoops, I didn't want that one. I want this other one. And that's the cutting complexity, okay? So with this one pricing form, you're seeing what it is that we're producing, how many we're doing, what the size is, what printer we're going to use, what materials we're going to use. We're going to laminate it as kind of an add-on process, and we're going to cut these little guys to size. So the total price is $14,400, and the unit price is $1 or almost $2. And if we look down in the parts tab, we're going to see that the total cost is $7,200. Roughly $1 a piece is the cost. And I want you to keep that dollar a piece in mind. And I want you to keep the $2 in a few cents in mind, okay? So now we're going to say okay to that. So this is the part that the item that we're producing, these stickers. And the cost is the $14,397. Now, the process to get this into finished goods inventory, we come down to this data set, we're going to come down to this category called miscellaneous, and we're going to expand it. Let me widen this out so we can see it a little better. And we're going to choose this particular product, okay? It's called Add to Finished Goods Inventory. So here, we need to tell it what it is that we're using, okay? What's the type? We've created several types. There's one in here that's called Composition Inventory. That's the one that we want. And then what specifically the items within that Composition Inventory category are several of them. And I've created one here for this particular guy that's called stickers with lamination 9x6. And we're going to produce 7,200 of them. All right, key thing to note here. The unit price is a negative $1.99, almost $2 a piece. And it's a negative $14,397.84. I'm just going to say okay to that at this point. Now, notice that this appears as a child, okay? So the Add to Finished Goods is a child product. So the customer's not, if they were to see this invoice, they're not going to see that that is a child. Now, this is really, really important because of rounding. The unit price and the unit cost may not come out exactly to a net of 0. And notice that we're off by 6 cents, okay? So I'm going to cheat a little bit because it's important that they net to 0. So I'm going to open that pricing form again. I'm going to come up. Notice that it's off by 6 cents. So I'm going to come into here, and I'm going to come into the discount area, and I'm going to put in the negative 0.06 and say OK. And now I'm at a net of 0. Okay. So you have to be careful because of rounding. Even though you go out 3 and 4 digits, you may be on large items like this. You may be off a little bit. So we're now we're balanced. We've got the cost to produce the items with lamination and with the cutting, but we're offsetting that for purposes of the invoice for this particular item. Then we're going to go to the cost tab. Here we're going to say, when is this due? This is pretty normal, nothing to do with putting things into finished goods at all. But the important last step is that we need to give it a purchase order number. I'm going to use 10, okay? And I'm going to help remember that. So now we've we've created the item, we've done the offsetting, and going to put it into inventory. We've associated the invoice number with it, and now I'm going to save this as an order and give it the blessing here. Now, if we were to preview that invoice, hopefully we'll see a value of 0. And there's the invoice. So if you were to send this to the customer, this is what is being produced, and it's not being invoiced. And here's the PO number that is associated with that order. So let me pause here before I switch over to the other data set to see if there's any comments or questions and with what we've just covered. Linda, can you keep an eye on the questions? I've got my control button over to the side.
Yes, I am monitoring questions, and at this time there aren't any.
Okay. What I'm going to do now is change the view. So give me just a second here to go to the other database. Okay, are you seeing this second entry under quick products? Are you seeing digital prints, Linda?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have 2 questions though.
Okay. I'll pause here.
Okay, the first question is from Mariel McDonald. And the question is, what is the benefit of using the PO? And I will unmute you.
Okay, the benefit, Muriel, is that when we get towards the end of our discussion today, I'm going to show you a report that's that's a standard report in the system where you can reference the date. It might be this month or next or last month or whatever, and then you enter the purchase order number. And that's going to show you how many widgets were put into inventory and what the current level is of what is remaining from what was put in. So it's how you're going to track the original placement of the goods into finished goods inventory, and then it's going to show you the current status of what has been pulled from finished goods inventory. Does that help? Well, I'll show that when we get to the end.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. We have a second question, Paul.
Okay.
This is from Scott. And the question is, what happens if you use the same PO number on different orders?
the reporting is going to combine the two. I've not tried that trick, but I'm afraid that it would combine the two into, from a reporting standpoint, that's what you would see would be a combination of the two. Now, I think that there might be a valid application to do that, because if you're replenishing the same item, you may indeed want to use the same PO number, to do that. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to avoid. It's just be aware that it's going to come from a reporting standpoint. It's going to combine the two purchase placements and the two additions into inventory, and then it's going to show the combination of what has been pulled out. Does that make sense? Okay,
we have one more question.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, and this is from Greg. How are prepaid finished goods handled? Most of our finished goods are prepaid. We simply warehouse and distribute.
It's a good question, Greg. I'd have to think about it for a minute.
Wouldn't they go in as zero value because it's not?
It's going into the system as a zero value. I'd have to test this to make sure. You could remit a payment to that original invoice for the full amount, but that's going to go in as a credit balance for that customer. And then subsequent, that would be dangerous, Greg, I think, because it would not differentiate and reduce that. Only you'd have to make sure that when you repeat and start pulling from it, that you make sure that you're only applying that credit or a portion of that credit for a specific PO number. I think you could still post the payment for the entire amount, and that's going to create a customer credit, but you would have to be very diligent that you didn't apply part of that credit to orders that are not related to that PO. Linda, do you have any additional thoughts or wisdom on that?
The only thing I would mention is ownership of the inventory, because once it's paid, it's really customer supplied, because it's really not owned by the company. I would probably defer that to the consulting department for.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, just to make sure that that it makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to just quickly show the determination of what version you have in this system database. It's same place, pricing setup, all pricing, user constants, and notice that I have product info here. And if I look over here, I have the same entry that says data set version and a bunch of numbers. The important one is the 3, the initial 3. So it's the same way of finding it. It's just you're looking for something a little bit different. So it's either that universal product information or it's product information itself. Same introductory comments that it's a 3-step process. You're putting stuff into inventory, you're associating that with a PO number, and that goes in with the zero value invoice amount. And now the process of doing this in V3 initially may sound a little bit more complex. I don't think it is. So let's go through and see how the process is handled. And I'm going to do that by doing a new order. let's do the same thing here. And then I'm going to use the digital product, or digital, this called digital prints. Now here's where we begin to see a difference between the two databases. I want you to think in a slightly different way on this explanation. This is a product. The digital prints is a product, and it achieves its end result by one or more processes. So think of the first process as being where you tell it the quantity, the number of originals, where you're telling it the height and width in either feet or in inches, which kind of printer you're using, whether it's a flatbed or a roll printer or a thermal printer, what kind of resolution you want, what kind of material you're producing it to, the type of material, and the material itself. And in this case, whether or not you're using application tape. So think of this as the initial or the basic process. The other processes that you can see are over here on the right. You may have a process for design time. You have a process for adding lamination. You have a process for mounting, for cutting, painting, finishing. These are the standard other common processes that have been associated with this particular product, okay? And these are all handled by templates. So if you look at the downward arrow, if we select the downward arrow, you're going to see a fairly lengthy list. Three of these are the basic ones that are part of the system when it actually ships. One of them is custom flat stock, which is what it came up as initially. The next one is custom roll print. And I think the third one is banner. Banner product process up here, the banner large prints. These others, this 9x6 stickers, this one that says inventory here and here, these are other templates that I have created from the basic one, in this case, the custom roll print. Okay, so they have the basic ones, the three, the banner, the flat stock printer, and the roll printer. Now, what I've done here then is I wanted to create a custom template that would include some things that were not part of the standard template. And I'm going to do that by selecting this little T. And with the T, you can either add a new part, and this is literally a new part that you can add to the system, or you can edit an existing one. So in this case, I could choose, let me come back and I didn't get the one that I wanted here, just a second. I want to go to custom roll print, and then I'm going to choose the T, and I can either add a new one, a new template in this case, or I can edit an existing one. So if I wanted to create a new one, I would give it a new name. And I'm just going to put in here stickers, and I'm going to stop there. Now, for this template, I can come over here to the side and select what other processes I want to be associated with this new template. It could be design, It could be lamination, mounting, cutting, painting, finishing. And if I wanted to make sure that it added this add inventory, then I would put in the name over here. So, and I can I can do other things. So you can select the processes, and you can even pre-populate some of the other basic parameters. When you're done, if you see this little symbol right here, that would save that template, okay, for subsequent use. I'm going to cancel that because I want to use one that I've already created. That's this come up here to the top so I can see what I'm looking at. Custom roll printers. This bottom one. Okay. So I have already these are still here, and on a yes/no basis, they can be used, and I'm going to demonstrate that. But I've always permanently checked this add inventory, and that's crucial. And you're seeing evidence of that down here as the 1A add to inventory. So it's going to automatically add this to inventory. So I'm going to start off by doing 7,200, just like we did in the other system. It's 9 inches by 6 inches. Going to use this printer, high resolution, the high resolution, and I'm going to put it on this particular material. And just to kind of make it similar to the other one, okay. Now, if I wanted to add lamination, I would just put a check mark there, and it opens up this other item, okay? And if I want to use a cold laminator and this particular material, the price of that lamination is $5,400, okay? And then if I also want to add, so that we have similar comparison to the other V2 thing that we did the same way, here I'm adding cutting. So if I'm going to use the plotter, I'm going to use the simple one, and it's going to add an additional $1,980 some. Okay. Now the last thing that I want to do, so here's the price. Now you always want to do the add to inventory as the last step. Okay. So here I have entered, it carries forward the quantity that are being produced. And now I'm going to choose the item type, and 9x6 stickers. I named it differently in this system, okay? 9x6 stickers, and then specifically, it's the 9x6 stickers with lamination. And it's going to take the unit cost and the unit price from what it had previously been saved as, okay? That can be altered if you need to do that. Now I'm going to say okay. I missed something here. Hang on a second. All right, something's not cooperating with me. Add the inventory, stickers. Well, I'm not going to fight with it. I'm going to switch over to another one that I've already got saved. Sorry. I'm not sure why that was not picking it up, but it should. You see the negative 14,644? That's what it should have produced. I don't know if I missed something. And then all these other items had the positive numbers, the 72, 54, and the addition of that last child item brought this so that it's a net of 0. Okay. I'm going to edit this just to make sure that I've got the PO that I want in there. I'm going to use 10 in this system, and I'm going to change this to next week. Okay, this is related to the putting the purchase orders in the material invoicing or inventory. Okay, now it's in inventory. Okay, let me get myself caught up on my notes here. Just a second. Okay, I'm going to stop here to see if we've got questions, because then I'm going to follow this with the next step that would be the process of pulling it out of inventory. You know,
we do have one comment from Ellen, and it says add to inventory needs to be last step.
Yes.
Make it 1C.
Yes. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you want it to be the last step in the completion of all the process template forms. Okay. All right. Now to pull stuff out of inventory, it's the same basic process that we did before. I better make sure that I'm using the same company as I did and what we just looked at. And it was this one right here. So it's walk-in is who I used. Okay. So the concept here would be that I'm going to use the same company and pulling. And here, I need to look at a slightly different way of pulling the product is called finished goods. And if you look, it's not in this list here, but in this data set, if you go up to view all products, the one that you're interested in is in miscellaneous. And it's this one right here called finished goods. The product name is the same regardless of whether you're pulling it from the V2 data set or the V3 data set. The process is the same. So I'm going to choose this one. And here, this is where it's going to look different between the two data sets. So here it's listing the item or the item parts that have been previously added, and particularly this first one. So let's say that we want 500 of them, okay? And I want the cost to be 51 cents. I'm overriding this. And then you can put the price in. I want the price to be the $2.03. And that's it. I'm going to say okay. Come on. I keep forgetting this add to order. So here it's showing the quantity and the cost and the price and the invoice price. Now that item has been added. I would come back into the totals, set the due date, put in the PO number, and save it, just like I did. Now, if we look at this particular invoice, do a preview on it, we're going to see the $1,600. Here's the item, finished goods, the quantity, what it was that we pulled, and the price, the unit price, and the full price. Now, I'm going to show the report next from this particular database, and then see what we've got for questions and time, and then I can go back to the other database. You need to show the same process. It's essentially the same. It looks a little bit different. Okay. So to see what the inventory levels are, I'm going to come up to reports, and I'm going to come down to customer and receivables. And the one that's important is this very last one, finished inventory statement by PO. So I'm just going to put in here this week. And then the next key thing is the PO number. So I'm going to say that, and I want PO number 10. And then do a preview. This report, incidentally, is identical between the two databases. Okay, so what you're seeing here is that invoice number 1058 for 7,200 stickers with lamination went into inventory, 7,200 of them. Invoice 1081 that we just saved, we were pulling from inventory. We pulled 500 of them, and the price that we pulled, and what is, I'm still in WIP, so it actually hasn't pulled them out, but what you would see is that the quantity would begin to decrease. Okay, so this report is the same, regardless of what data set. Now, any questions? We got about 10 more minutes. If need be, I can go back over to the other database to show the pulling from inventory. But if everybody's okay with not doing that, I would rather devote it to questions. Any questions?
No questions, Paul.
All right. Well, in that case, I am going to go back to the other data set. Come on. Well, maybe not. It's not letting me switch back to the other database. Maybe that will here just a second. There we go. Okay, you should be seeing order number 1030, Linda.
Yes.
Okay. The process is the same. Come in, new order, test company, pulling, and in this case, we're coming down to the miscellaneous category. Here, we from our earlier discussion when we were putting it in, this is where you add to it, and this is where you pull from it. So I'm going to open up the pricing form, and I'm going to pull it from, and this data set, I use that category name and the parts that I'm pulling, and I'm pulling 500 of them, and it's taking the unit price and the calculated price. You would want to verify that these are correct, and you can do that by coming down to the parts and say view parts. If you see that the unit price is not correct, or the cost or price, you can do a view part and look at the cost tab. And if you need to, you can correct the price or the cost here. And then it should show the price down here as use this price. So if it's not producing, if something changed, then you can override the the pricing or the unit cost. So if we're done with that, it's very much the same. Just doing a save order, putting in the date, and now we should be able to look at the reports and the customers and receivables. Same report here. I bet I forgot to put the PO number in that one. Just a second. Yep. Put in the PO number. Now let's go up to the report. Customers and receivables, inventory. Today, that would have been okay. Leave it as okay, or today. And the PO number is 10. And this should show the same thing that we did before, okay? What went in, and this invoice pulling it out, 500 of them, and the price that it pulled out. So it's just a little bit different in the between the two databases. More so on putting things in, but the big difference is in the V3 is the processes that you're talking about, and then the process slightly different on pulling stuff out. We're about 5 or 6 more minutes. Any last minute questions on either of these data sets or anything else?
No questions, Paul.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for hope this has been helpful. Have a good holiday weekend, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.